Chosen ones. This one act made God smile more than you realize, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I want to speak to you about something so profound, so quietly powerful, that most people will pass through their lives without ever recognizing it. Yet, God Himself has taken notice. There is one act, a single moment of your choice, that has made Him smile more than you realize. And it is not the grand gestures, the loud displays, or the visible achievements that bring this smile. No, it is the subtle, faithful decisions you make when no one is watching, when the world doubts you, and even when your own heart questions if it's worth it. Many of you have walked through storms where the wind seemed too strong, where circumstances pressed in and hope felt like a distant memory. And yet, there is a part of you that refused to surrender. You chose faith over fear. You chose to believe in the unseen rather than react to the seen. You chose to trust God's promise, even when everything around you suggested otherwise. That choice, simple as it may seem, is the very thing that draws heaven's attention. God smiles at loyalty. He smiles at patience. He smiles at hearts that are willing to hold steady when the world wants them to waver. And you, the chosen ones, have done this more than you know. Every time you forgave when bitterness screamed louder, every time you spoke words of faith when doubt whispered in your ear, every time you waited silently for the promise to manifest while others lost hope. God noticed these moments may feel ordinary to you, but in the eyes of the divine, they are extraordinary. They are acts of alignment, acts of obedience, acts of surrender that cannot be measured by human standards. This speech is not just a reminder of your faith, it is a revelation. It is an unveiling of the spiritual reality that exists behind every visible struggle. God is smiling because you have chosen rightly when it mattered most. You have chosen alignment when distraction called. You have chosen mercy when resentment beckoned. And you have chosen trust when impatience could have ruled your heart. Each of these choices carries a weight that bends timelines, shifts realities, and unlocks blessings that are yet to manifest in the physical. So, as we go deeper today, understand this. The act that made God smile is not a secret hidden in the past. It is alive in your present, a living testimony that your faith, your loyalty, your forgiveness, and your trust are seen. Heaven celebrates it. Angels rejoice in it. And the promises of God, once distant, are now being drawn closer to your reality because of that one simple yet monumental act. Ladies and gentlemen, open your hearts and minds, for what I am about to reveal will show you how your quiet acts of faith are not unnoticed. They are powerful, they are transformative, and they are the very reason why God smiles upon you more than you have ever imagined. The moment you chose faith over fear was not a loud moment. It was not an announcement to the world, nor a display of your strength. It was a quiet, intimate choice between two paths, one that whispered doubt, despair, and limitation, and another that spoke of promise, hope, and divine certainty. Most people do not recognize these moments because they appear small, insignificant, almost invisible. But God does not measure greatness by human perception. He measures it by the alignment of your consciousness with His truth. That single act of choosing faith over fear is more powerful than any words you could speak, any prayer you could shout, or any outward achievement you could claim. Faith is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward despite fear. There were times when the clouds of uncertainty gathered around you, when the future seemed unclear, and when the path you were walking appeared riddled with obstacles. In those moments, your heart could have surrendered. Your mind could have accepted the limitations of the world. But something within you, something subtle yet unshakable, chose to believe in the invisible reality rather than the visible struggle. That is the moment that made God smile. Every human being encounters fear. It is a natural response to the unknown, but it is the chosen ones who understand that fear is merely a signal, not a verdict. Fear is the world's way of testing whether you will conform to its expectations or whether you will rise into the consciousness of the divine. You stood in that moment and said silently, I will not bow to fear. I will walk by the promise I have received, not by the circumstance I see. That act of internal obedience is what heaven honors. Think about the countless times your faith seemed to clash with reality. Every challenge, every delay, every unanswered prayer was an opportunity to choose again. And in each of these moments, you chose faith. You did not merely hope that things would change. You aligned your imagination with the outcome you desired. You saw yourself victorious before the victory appeared. You held the reality of God's promise in your consciousness as if it were already tangible. That is the secret of your power. That is why God smiled. Faith over fear is an act of creation. When you choose faith, you are speaking directly to the unseen forces of the universe. You are declaring that your reality will be determined by divine truth rather than by human limitations. You are telling the world, and most importantly yourself, that you will not be defined by circumstance, that you will not be shaped by doubt, and that you will not be restrained by delay. Every time you chose to move forward despite uncertainty, you activated divine energy that was waiting for your consent to manifest. Many people think courage is an external act, a bold decision, a dramatic move, a public declaration. But true courage is internal. It is the quiet confidence that what God has promised is already true. It is the steady heartbeat that continues to believe when the mind wants to question. You were courageous in the invisible realms long before the world could see your triumph. That courage is recorded in heaven. It is remembered by angels. It is the act that makes God smile. Fear is persistent. It returns again and again, disguised as reason, logic, or self-preservation. But faith is persistent as well. Each time fear arose, you consciously chose to step forward into the unknown. You allowed your inner vision to dominate your outer circumstances. You refused to give power to doubt, to worry, or to anxiety. That refusal is what separates the chosen ones from the ordinary. That refusal is the divine alignment that sets timelines into motion and prepares the stage for miracles that are already in progress. You may have noticed that when you choose faith over fear, doors begin to open in ways that seem miraculous. Opportunities appear where none existed. Guidance comes when you least expect it. People enter your life who reflect and support your vision. And these are not coincidences. They are the natural results of your internal choice. God smiles not at your achievements alone, but at the decision within you to trust the unseen, to act as if the promise is already fulfilled, and to refuse fear any dominion over your life. Faith is a living energy. It grows each time it is exercised. Every moment you rejected fear and embraced faith, You strengthened your connection to the invisible realm. You became a magnet for divine guidance, favor, and abundance. Your inner world shaped your outer world, and in ways you may not even recognize. Your faith set off a chain reaction that is still unfolding. That quiet choice is far more powerful than any external effort because it touches the root of all creation, belief. Consider the power of a single decision. One choice to believe, one refusal to yield to fear can change the trajectory of a lifetime. It alters the landscape of your destiny. It shifts the energy around you. It creates a space where miracles can manifest. And yet, most people underestimate its significance because it does not happen with noise or fanfare. But God, who sees the heart, who knows the unseen, recognizes that moment as a triumph, a victory, and a reason to smile. Faith over fear is the foundation of every supernatural experience. Every answered prayer, every unexpected provision, every divine encounter begins with a choice. And that choice is not made in the physical world. It is made in the consciousness. When you chose faith over fear, you participated in creation itself. You aligned yourself with the divine current that shapes reality. You became a co-creator of your destiny, a beacon for the fulfillment of promises, and a living testimony that God's power is activated by belief. This act is not a one-time event. It is a continuing practice. Fear will return, doubt will arise, and circumstances will test you. But each time you choose faith, you reinforce the invisible foundations of your life. Each time you act as if the promise is already fulfilled, you solidify the reality you are creating. And each time God smiles because you are doing exactly what the chosen ones are called to do, walking in trust, acting in alignment, and believing in the invisible more than the visible. Remember this: the world may never recognize your courage. People may never applaud your persistence. But in the eyes of God, your faith is monumental. Your choice to trust, to move forward, and to embrace the unseen has eternal significance. That is the moment that made God smile. And it is the same power that continues to shape your life, to open doors, and to bring into existence what was once only imagined. Your faith is not small. Your courage is not hidden. Your choice to believe in the promise despite fear is monumental in the spiritual realm. That one act, repeated and strengthened over time, defines the chosen one. That one act creates miracles. That one act makes God smile more than you realize. There is a moment in every chosen one's life when the world expects silence, when speaking up seems inconvenient, dangerous, or unnecessary. And yet, in that moment, you spoke, not out of pride, not to impress, not for recognition, but from alignment with a higher truth. You spoke because your heart could not remain idle while the unseen reality of God's promise waited to be declared. Most people underestimate the power of words. They think of them as mere sounds, fleeting expressions that disappear into air. But words are not idle. They are the bridge between the invisible world and the visible world. They are the seeds of creation. And the moment you spoke from alignment, God smiled more than you realize. The world often tempts you to remain silent. It says, wait until the timing is perfect, or do not risk being misunderstood, or it is better to avoid conflict. And in most situations, silence seems easier, but alignment is never easy. Alignment requires courage. It requires you to speak as if what you declare is already true, even when circumstances suggest the opposite. Your words, when spoken from faith rather than fear, carry a frequency that resonates with heaven. They attract unseen forces to your side. They bend realities, and they open doors that would otherwise remain closed. Consider how many times you could have complained, doubted, or criticized. You had every justification to speak out in frustration or despair. You could have allowed fear, resentment, or disappointment to shape your words, but you chose differently. You chose words that honored God's promise. You chose to speak in faith. You chose declarations that reflected the reality of what is rather than the illusion of what appears to be. That choice is monumental. It is a spiritual act, an alignment of consciousness, and an invitation for the invisible to manifest in the visible. When you speak in alignment, your words carry authority. They are not mere expressions. They are commands to the unseen, declarations that shape outcomes, and confirmations of what is already written in the spiritual realm. God is pleased when his chosen ones recognize this power and use it wisely. Every statement you make from faith is a miniature act of creation. Every affirmation you declare in the face of uncertainty is a spark that ignites divine movement. Every confident word spoken in alignment is a step closer to the fulfillment of promises that others only dream about. Many people fear speaking because they believe their words are insignificant. They think that silence is safe, that remaining unnoticed will protect them from failure or ridicule. But the truth is, silence in moments of alignment is wasted potential. Silence delays the manifestation of blessings. Silence denies the power of faith. And silence prevents the world from experiencing the influence of the chosen ones. Your decision to speak, even when it was difficult, was an act that shifted timeline. It was an act that brought angels into motion. It was an act that made God smile. Speaking in alignment requires self-mastery. It requires the ability to control the tongue, the mind, and the emotion. It is easy to speak from doubt or anger. It is easy to echo the fears of the world. But speaking from alignment requires that you hold a vision of reality as it ought to be. It requires that you declare your faith louder than your fear, that your trust in God outweighs your trust in circumstance, and that your imagination aligns with his promises. Every time you do this, you are participating in creation. Every time you declare truth in the face of uncertainty, you are shaping your destiny. Words spoken in alignment carry a vibration that attracts opportunities, guidance, and divine intervention. They set events in motion that cannot be reversed. They plant seeds in the soil of consciousness that will bear fruit when the conditions are ripe. And the most extraordinary part is that the fruit often appears in ways you could never have anticipated. It may come through people, circumstances, or doors that seemed closed, but it always comes. And the reason it comes is that your words, spoken in alignment, were heard in the invisible realms where God works. There is also a subtle, unseen reward for speaking in alignment. It builds spiritual confidence. It strengthens faith. It trains your imagination to see reality as it is in God's eyes rather than as it appears in the world. Every declaration you make in alignment trains your consciousness to live in the end result, to act as if the promise is already fulfilled. And this training is what sets the chosen ones apart from those who wait passively, hoping that circumstances will change them, rather than taking responsibility for shaping reality through faith-filled speech. It is important to remember that speaking in alignment is not about repetition or empty affirmations. It is about authenticity. It is about sincerity. It is about truth. Your words must resonate with the reality of the promise you are claiming. They must reflect a deep conviction that the unseen is more real than the seen. They must emerge from a consciousness that knows God is faithful, that the promise is true, and that the conditions of the world are secondary to divine reality. When your words meet this standard, they are potent beyond measure. There is a principle that many overlook. What you say aloud in alignment is more than a reflection of belief. It is an invitation for manifestation. Every time you speak as if what is promised is already present, you are aligning your world with the invisible forces of God. You are declaring that doubt, limitation, and delay have no authority over your life. You are affirming that the chosen ones operate in a reality that transcends the physical. And each time you do this, the divine smiles because you are living in truth. Even in moments of discomfort, even when speaking might have led to criticism or misunderstanding, you chose faith-filled speech over silence. That courage, though unseen by many, is monumental. It is an act of co-creation. It is an alignment with the spiritual laws that govern the universe. It is the evidence that you are one of the chosen ones who does not merely witness reality, but actively shapes it through thought, imagination, and spoken word. Your ability to speak in alignment has ripple effect. It impacts not only your life, but the lives of those around you. People respond to the vibration of your words. They are influenced, inspired, and elevated by declarations that reflect faith rather than fear. Doors open, guidance arrives, and circumstances shift, not because of external effort alone, but because your words have called forth the unseen into expression. Every declaration made in alignment reinforces the invisible foundations of your life and magnifies your spiritual authority. So recognize the monumental significance of speaking in alignment. Each word you have spoken from faith is a sacred act. Every time you refuse to echo fear, every time you declared God's truth over circumstance, every time you spoke the reality of promise rather than the illusion of limitation, you made God smile. This is the power of the chosen ones. This is the authority of those who understand that speech is creation. This is the act that continues to shape timelines, bend realities, and bring divine blessings into manifestation. Your words are not ordinary. Your declarations are not insignificant. Every sentence spoken in alignment carries weight in the spiritual realm. Every affirmation of truth is a seed planted in the soil of divine reality. And every time you choose faith-filled speech over silence, you participate in the eternal work of creation itself. That is why God smiles. That is why your words are powerful. That is why you, the chosen ones, are positioned to manifest the promises of heaven in ways the world cannot yet comprehend. Loyalty is one of the most overlooked acts in the spiritual life, yet it is one of the most powerful. It is easy to stay when everything is comfortable, when applause surrounds you, and when the path is smooth. But true loyalty is revealed in the dark, when circumstances challenge your commitment, when others abandon the journey, and when it seems that the world itself is testing your resolve. It is in these moments that the chosen ones rise above the ordinary, and it is in these moments that God smiles. Staying loyal when others walked away is not just an act of patience. It is an act of alignment with the unseen, a declaration that your heart will not be swayed by circumstance, and a confirmation that your destiny is too valuable to be compromised. Many people confuse loyalty with obligation or persistence in the face of futility. They believe that staying is about enduring hardship, tolerating delay, or resisting temptation. But true loyalty is not passive. It is not a mechanical endurance of difficulty. True loyalty is an active alignment with God's promise, a conscious choice to remain connected to what is real, eternal, and divine, regardless of how the external world behaves. It is a refusal to abandon the invisible for the temporary comfort of the visible. That is why God notices when you stay. That is why he smiles when you do not waver. The test of loyalty often comes in disguise. People will leave, circumstances will fail, and doors will close. Friends may turn away, family may misunderstand, and opportunities may seem scarce. The world will whisper that giving up is the sensible option, that walking away is the only logical path, that your efforts are in vain. Yet, the chosen ones, the ones whose hearts are aligned with the divine, see beyond the deception. They recognize that departure is not always weakness, and that remaining is not always visible reward. To stay loyal in the face of all odds is to declare that your allegiance is not to the temporal, but to the eternal. Consider the many times in your life when loyalty was tested. There were situations when leaving would have seemed easier, when abandoning your assignment would have relieved the pressure, when detaching from God's plan might have seemed like a form of self preservation. And yet, you stayed. You did not compromise. You did not surrender. You did not trade destiny for comfort. Every act of remaining faithful, even when unseen, creates a momentum that shifts realities. Every choice to honor God's path, even when abandoned by others, signals to the universe that you are ready to receive divine favor. That is the power of loyalty. Loyalty strengthens the soul. Every time you remain faithful while others walk away, you reinforce the connection between your heart and the unseen world. You demonstrate that your life is guided by divine purpose rather than human expectation. You declare that your commitment is not conditional on recognition or reward. And this builds a spiritual authority that cannot be shaken. God smiles at such dedication because it is a reflection of unwavering faith, a mirror of eternal trust, and a confirmation that you are a vessel through which divine promises can manifest. It is important to recognize that loyalty is not always rewarded in the way the human mind expects. The world measures success by immediate returns, by applause, by visible validation. But loyalty, when genuine, produces results in the invisible realm first. It shifts timelines. It attracts divine resources. It aligns circumstances that will eventually manifest as blessing. By remaining steadfast when others walked away, you positioned yourself to receive what is greater than what anyone else could offer. The unseen always precedes the seen, and your loyalty is the magnet that draws it near. The most powerful aspect of loyalty is that it shapes character. It forms a consciousness that does not bend to fear, peer pressure, or impatience. It creates resilience that cannot be broken by opposition or betrayal. It teaches the heart to trust the divine process even when the world seems chaotic. And in this cultivation of inner strength, your life becomes a testimony of divine faithfulness. Angels celebrate it. The unseen realms are moved by it. And God smiles at it because loyalty is the hallmark of the chosen ones. Many times, loyalty requires courage. It is not a passive act, but a continuous practice of faith. When everyone around you doubts, when the path seems uncertain, when fear tempts you to leave, loyalty demands that you remain. It requires a vision of the unseen that exceeds the limitations of the visible. It demands trust in promises that are not yet fulfilled. And it calls for alignment with a reality that is eternal rather than temporary. Those who master loyalty are the ones who ultimately manifest miracles, for their faithfulness creates a gravitational pull that draws blessings, opportunities, and divine encounters to them. Think about the profound effect of staying when all else departs. You become a living testament to God's promises. Your endurance inspires others, even if they do not recognize it. Your steadfastness forms a foundation upon which miracles are built. Your loyalty is a seed planted in the soil of eternity, producing fruit in its appointed season. And the truth is, you will not always see the immediate outcome, but your act of remaining aligned has already set events into motion that cannot be stopped. The world may never recognize the significance of your choice to remain. People may applaud those who succeed publicly and criticize those who endure quietly. Yet, in the eyes of the divine, loyalty is monumental. The act of staying when abandonment would have been easier demonstrates that your allegiance is not superficial. It is a conscious decision to honor the invisible reality, to protect the promise, and to trust in the timing of God. Each moment of loyalty, though invisible to the human eye, is recorded in eternity. There is a profound joy in understanding that your loyalty matters. It matters to God. It matters to your destiny. It matters to the unseen forces that are orchestrating your life. By remaining faithful when others walked away, you are participating in the unfolding of a plan that only God can fully see. You are aligning yourself with miracles, blessings, and opportunities that are already waiting to manifest. That act of staying, of trusting, and of honoring your assignment is one of the highest spiritual acts you can perform. Loyalty is not passive compliance. It is not mere patience. It is the active choice to remain in alignment with divine purpose, despite adversity, despite opposition, despite abandonment. Every time you choose this path, you reinforce your authority as one of the chosen ones. Every time you remain when others leave, you signal to heaven that your heart is steadfast, that your vision is unwavering, and that you are ready to receive the fullness of your promises. That is why God smiles. That is why your loyalty is more powerful than you realize. That is why staying faithful while others walked away defines the chosen ones. Your life, shaped by loyalty, becomes a testimony to the unseen. It becomes proof that alignment, trust, and faithfulness are not theoretical concepts, but living reality. Your commitment, even when lonely, even when challenged, even when unrecognized, is monumental in the spiritual realm. And it is this act, the conscious decision to remain steadfast while others abandon the path, that continues to unlock doors, shift circumstances, and invite divine blessings into your life. The power of loyalty is subtle, yet its effects are eternal. By remaining faithful when others walked away, you became a magnet for divine intervention. You became a beacon of spiritual authority. You align yourself with realities that only those who stay can access. And the unseen world rejoices because loyalty is not just an act of waiting, it is an act of co creation, a demonstration of faith, and a reason for God to smile. Forgiveness is one of the most profound acts a chosen one can perform. Yet it is one of the most misunderstood. Many believe that forgiveness is about excusing wrongdoing, condoning betrayal, or forgetting the harm that has been done. But true forgiveness is far greater than that. It is not a favor for those who have wronged you. It is a gift you give to your own soul. It is the conscious decision to release resentment, to step out of the prison of bitterness, and to align your heart with the divine flow. When you forgave, even when every fiber of your being wanted to retaliate or hold grudges, you performed an act so monumental that it drew the smile of God, even more than you realize. It is easy to be forgiving when the offense is minor, when the pain is small, or when justice is obvious. But the chosen ones demonstrate a higher level of consciousness. They forgive when every excuse to be bitter seems justified. They release resentment when the wound is fresh, when betrayal is deep, and when the heart has been wronged. This is not weakness, it is strength. It is the conscious alignment of the soul with divine reality, choosing mercy over judgment, grace over resentment, and love over bitterness. It is the act of prioritizing the eternal over the temporary. Forgiveness is a declaration that you will not be held hostage by someone else's actions. It is the understanding that your peace, your spiritual elevation, and your alignment with God are far more important than the need to justify anger. By forgiving, you release yourself from the chains of the past. You create space for miracles, blessings, and divine intervention. You demonstrate that your life is governed by divine principles rather than human vindication. And it is precisely this act, this conscious choice to forgive despite every justification to be bitter, that makes God smile. The world often tells us that bitterness is deserved, that holding on to resentment is a form of justice, and that forgiveness without apology is weakness. But the truth is the opposite. Bitterness binds you. Resentment imprisons the soul. Refusal to forgive keeps you tethered to the very energy you are meant to rise above. Forgiveness, especially when undeserved or inconvenient, is an act of liberation. It releases you from limitations imposed by others and aligns your life with the freedom and favor of God. That is why the unseen celebrates forgiveness. It is a declaration that your reality is no longer determined by the past, but by the promises of the divine. Think of the countless moments in which you had every right to be angry, every reason to hate, and every justification to hold a grudge. In those moments, your mind may have whispered the language of bitterness. They owe me. I was wronged. Justice must be served. Yet your heart chose differently. You understood that justice in the human sense is temporal, but mercy in the spiritual sense is eternal. You recognize that the act of forgiveness elevates you. while the act of holding resentment diminishes your spirit. And in choosing mercy over bitterness, you aligned yourself with the invisible flow of divine favor. Forgiveness is also an act of power. It is not passive. It does not mean tolerating abuse or remaining in harmful circumstances. True forgiveness is active. It is a conscious decision to release the energetic hold that another person's actions have over you. When you forgive, you reclaim authority over your mind, emotions, and destiny. You refuse to let another's mistakes dictate your life. You step into the realm of divine authority, where your consciousness shapes your experience and your faith determines the outcomes you will manifest. That authority, exercised through forgiveness, is one of the most spiritually potent acts of the chosen ones. Consider the unseen implications of forgiveness. Every act of releasing bitterness resonates in the spiritual realm. It shifts energy, alters timelines, and opens doors that resentment could never open. Angels rejoice in the moment you release anger. Divine resources begin to move toward you. Opportunities manifest that would have been blocked by the vibration of unresolved pain. Forgiveness is the key that unlocks blessings, the lever that moves obstacles, and the magnet that draws favorable circumstances. That is why God smiles at this act, even when it seems invisible to human eyes. Forgiveness also transforms relationships. When you release bitterness, you break cycles of negativity. You create the space for reconciliation, growth, and healing, not only for others, but for yourself. You step out of the reactive consciousness and into the creative consciousness, where your reality is guided by divine intelligence rather than human emotion. By forgiving, you send a message to the universe. I am aligned with love. I am aligned with truth. I am aligned with God. That message resonates far beyond the immediate situation, shaping your life in ways that cannot be fully measured. Every chosen one who forgives demonstrates mastery over the self. It is easy to be spiritual when life is convenient. It is easy to release anger when the pain is minor. But the truly elevated soul forgives when it is difficult, when the wound is deep, and when the human instinct screams for retaliation. That is the act that distinguishes the chosen ones from the ordinary. That is the act that shifts realities. That is the act that makes God smile. Not because forgiveness is expected, but because it is a reflection of the heart aligned with divine truth. The world may never acknowledge your forgiveness. People may misunderstand your mercy, question your motives, or take advantage of your generosity. But God sees. The divine measures the depth of your heart, the alignment of your intentions, and the strength required to release resentment. Each time you forgive, you strengthen your connection to the unseen world, amplify your spiritual power, and create a pathway for miracles. That is the reward of mercy, the invisible joy that surpasses human recognition. Forgiveness is also a statement of trust. By forgiving, you demonstrate that you trust God to handle justice, timing, and resolution. You relinquish control over outcomes and declare that divine wisdom governs the universe. You act from a place of higher consciousness, knowing that the unseen always precedes the seen, and that what is aligned with God cannot fail. Forgiveness then is not only a release of bitterness, it is an affirmation of faith, a bold declaration that God's plan is greater than any human grievance, even when the pain is fresh, even when the betrayal is deep, and even when your heart longs for retribution. Choosing forgiveness is choosing alignment. It is a choice to place the eternal above the temporal, the divine above the human, and the promise above the grievance. Every time you do this, you are participating in creation itself. Every act of mercy resonates in the invisible realm, bending realities, opening doors, and positioning you for blessings that are beyond human imagination. That is why your forgiveness, when fully justified, is so powerful. That is why it made God smile more than you realize. Forgiveness is the highest form of faith. It requires belief in the unseen, trust in divine timing, and confidence in the ultimate goodness of life. When you forgive, you demonstrate that your consciousness is aligned with the principles of creation, that your reality is guided by eternal truth, and that your life is a reflection of divine order. Every time you let go of bitterness, you step further into the authority and freedom that belong to the chosen ones. Your act of forgiveness is monumental. It touches lives, shifts timelines, and activates blessing. It is a declaration that your life will not be defined by injury, insult, or betrayal. It is a signal to the universe that your faith is unshakable, your heart is aligned, and your destiny is secure. That is why your decision to forgive when bitterness seemed justified is one of the greatest acts of spiritual power you can perform. It is an act that God watches, remembers, and celebrates. Trusting the promise more than the delay is one of the most defining acts of the chosen ones. It is easy to believe when results appear quickly, when progress is visible, and when the world applauds. But faith that exceeds the timeline, patience that persists through silence, and trust that outlasts delay are rare. Yet it is in this very persistence that the divine finds joy. God smiles when you choose to hold on to the promise, even when everything in your external reality suggests that it may never arrive. You see, the delay is never a denial. It is a test, a refining fire, a period in which faith matures and the soul aligns more deeply with the reality that is already set in motion. The delay is not a punishment, nor is it a signal that God has forgotten you. It is an invitation to deepen your trust, to strengthen your belief, and to practice living as though the promise is already fulfilled. Many people falter because they measure the unseen by the clock of the world. They look at time, circumstances, and human logic as the ultimate authority. But the chosen ones measure reality by the invisible truth of the promise. They know that God's timing is perfect, that the unseen is infinitely more real than the seen, and that patience exercised in faith is far more powerful than impatience driven by circumstance. Consider how many times you have felt the weight of waiting. Days, weeks, months, and even years may have passed since the promise was spoken into your life. The delay can feel heavy, oppressive, and discouraging. And yet, you chose trust. You chose to believe in what God had spoken rather than what the world was showing. You chose to carry the vision in your heart and live as if it were already true, even when nothing around you confirmed it. That act alone is monumental. Well, it demonstrates a consciousness aligned with the divine, a heart surrendered to the promise, and a mind that refuses to be distracted by appearances. Trusting the promise more than the delay requires imagination. It requires seeing the end result clearly in your mind and holding it there with unwavering conviction. It requires living in the reality of the fulfilled promise while the physical evidence remains unseen. And it requires faith so strong that the delay itself becomes irrelevant. This is the hallmark of the chosen ones. They know that the promise exists, that it is true, and that it will manifest, and they refuse to be swayed by the passage of time. That refusal, that unwavering focus, is what makes God smile. The delay often feels like a test, a challenge designed to measure your persistence, patience, and alignment. It can feel as though the world is conspiring to push you into doubt, but in reality, the delay is a spiritual training ground. It teaches you to trust without needing immediate proof, to act in accordance with promise rather than appearance, and to cultivate an inner certainty that cannot be shaken by circumstance. Every moment of patience exercised in faith strengthens your connection to the unseen realm and amplifies the power of the promise you are holding. Many people abandon the promise because the waiting period feels uncomfortable or inconvenient. They seek instant results, quick validation, and immediate reward. But the chosen ones understand a profound truth. The delay is not an obstacle. It is a sacred preparation. It is the time in which your consciousness must align fully with the reality you are calling for. It is the period in which doubt must be replaced with unwavering faith, impatience with steadfast trust, and uncertainty with the deep knowing of the unseen. By trusting the promise more than the delay, you participate in a spiritual process that produces results far greater than you could imagine. Every day you live in faith while waiting, you are activating the creative power of God within you. You are sending a signal to the unseen world that you are ready, worthy, and aligned. Your trust becomes a magnet, drawing the promise toward manifestation. The delay, once perceived as a hindrance, becomes an instrument through which your faith is made visible. It is proof that your belief is not superficial, that your commitment is unwavering, and that your consciousness is aligned with the eternal, not the temporal. That is why your trust, exercised in the silence of waiting, is monumental. It is also important to recognize that trusting the promise more than the delay requires courage. It is easier to succumb to doubt, to succumb to impatience, or to follow the paths that offer immediate relief. But true courage is the courage to remain in faith, to live in alignment with promise, while ignoring the misleading evidence of the world, and to hold steady when everyone else has given up. Your courage is not measured by outward action alone. It is measured by the persistence of your inner belief when circumstances try to shake it. That courage is a reason for God to smile, for it demonstrates the heart of a chosen one. The promise is not bound by time. It exists in the unseen, and the unseen, trusting the promise more than the delay, is an acknowledgement of this truth. It is a declaration that your reality is shaped not by elapsed time, but by divine law. It is a refusal to allow appearances to dictate your inner state. It is the practice of living in the end, knowing that what God has spoken will manifest exactly as intended. Every day you maintain this trust. You align yourself more fully with the divine current that is already carrying the promise to you. Patience in waiting is not passive. It is active faith. It is a daily decision to align thoughts, emotions, and actions with the promise. even when the external world remains unchanged. It is the conscious refusal to let fear, doubt, or frustration erode your belief. It is a constant practice of living as though the vision is already fulfilled, speaking as though the blessing has already arrived, and acting as though the outcome is certain. In this act of alignment, the power of the promise is multiplied, and the delay loses its capacity to shake your inner peace. The delay also serves as a filter, separating those who are truly aligned from those who are not. Many abandon the promise when the waiting period becomes uncomfortable. They trade divine alignment for temporary satisfaction, immediate reward, or human logic. But the chosen ones remain. They endure, they persist, they trust. And this persistence demonstrates not only faith, but also readiness to receive. The universe responds to those who do not give up, who do not falter, and who do not measure success by temporal appearances. That is why God smiles when you trust the promise more than the delay. Trust transforms waiting from a period of uncertainty into a time of preparation, growth, and alignment. It trains the imagination to see the end result clearly. It strengthens the heart to endure without complaint, and it shapes consciousness to operate from faith rather than fear. Each moment of trust exercised during delay is a step toward manifestation, a vibration that draws the promise into physical reality, and a declaration that your life is aligned with divine time. That is the power of the chosen ones. That is why your trust matters more than you know. Even when the delay seems prolonged, even when circumstances appear stagnant, and even when human logic tempts you to despair, choosing to trust the promise is a monumental act. It demonstrates a consciousness that is anchored in the unseen, a heart that is surrendered to divine will, and a mind that refuses to be shaken by temporary appearances. Your trust is not passive, it is creative, it is magnetic. It is a declaration that God's promises are true, inevitable, and already moving toward you. And that is why God smiles, not at the length of the waiting, but at the depth of your faith. Trusting the promise more than the delay is one of the highest forms of spiritual mastery. It is the essence of co-creation. It is the practice of living in the end, knowing that what is promised cannot fail. It is the act of aligning your consciousness with divine law and refusing to let circumstances dictate your reality. Every moment you do this, you participate in the unfolding of miracles, the manifestation of blessings, and the fulfillment of promises that were spoken long ago. That is the act that makes God smile more than you realize.